Hello and welcome to Continual, the never-ending convention. My name is Jean Marie Ward, and with me tonight are 5 wonderful writers here to talk about your world or mine, writing in another person's universe. So to get the festivities started, I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves, beginning with Rachel.
I'm Rachel, otherwise known as R.E. Carr, author of such urban fantasy series as Rules Undying and the Download Files, but I'm also the co-author of the False Icon series with none other than Rick Walteri. So I guess that qualifies me to be on this panel today. Anyway, you can check me out at rachelecarr.com because that name wasn't taken.
Well, since you're writing with Rick, I suppose we'll have to ask him to introduce himself. Behave.
I'm wounded.
Not nearly enough.
Yeah, I'll get over it. Anyway, my name is Rick Walteri, and I kind of feel I need to correct Jean Marie here because we have 4 wonderful writers, and then you have me. Anyway, I am a horror comedy, fantasy, and horror writer. I've been doing this for about 10 years. I have about 30 books out there. And yes, I write with the illustrious award-winning R.E. Carr in one of those series, which is quite the experience.
Okay, great. Les?
Yeah, I'm Les Gould. I write science fiction and urban fantasy. And I got my debut novel was writing in John Hartness's Bubbaverse with Beginner's Luck. Is a collection of the 3 first novellas. So
very fun. Cool. Very cool. Lex?
Hi, I'm Alexandra Christian, and I write primarily paranormal and contemporary romance. I also dabble in Sherlock Holmes, which I guess counts as a shared universe. And probably my biggest qualification to be on this panel is that I write Dr. Watson Monster Hunter series for in the Quincy Harker universe with Falstaff Books.
Okay, great. And Bobby?
Hi, I'm Bobby Nash. I write all kinds of stuff, novels, comic books. I've dabbled in screenplays and audio plays and things like that as well. In addition to my own stuff, I have done some media tie-in work. I've written characters like the Green Hornet, some of the old pulp characters like the Spider and the Avenger, other comic book characters like Night Vale. I'm also doing a book set in John Hartness's Bubba universe. It'll be out sometime later this year, I believe. So it's fun playing with other people's toys. And for the first time this year, I've started letting people play with my characters, which is both exciting and terrifying, which I'm sure we'll talk about more as we go along. So.
Oh yeah, definitely. So what I'm going to ask you all next is tell me about the universes that are not your own, that you write in. Give us a little bit more on them. Bobby, I'll start with you because you've got a whole list of them here.
Yeah, I've been lucky enough. I've been some of the publishers I've worked with will do anthologies or novels or novellas with licensed characters, and so sometimes I'll get a call that says, "Do you have any interest in this character?" And it's like, "We've got this license. Do you want to write something?" And if it's a character, most of the time, if it's a character I like, I'll do it. There have been a couple of times where I've said, sure, I'll take it. And it's not a character I'm as familiar with, so I have to jump in and do some research. But sometimes it's characters, when it's characters you are a fan of, there's a real excitement to jump on those. Actually, just yesterday, I finished writing a Lone Ranger story. And so I watched the Lone Ranger growing up as a kid,
Yeah.
And so there was a bit of a thrill being able to play with those characters, or all the lines you think it pop into your head. Getting to write those characters is fun. So stuff like that. So I've done that. I've got a Kolchak one coming out. Kolchak the Night Stalker coming out. I've written the Green Hornet a couple times. That was fun. The Spider, the Avenger are all pulp characters that they're not public domain. They're still licensed characters. So getting to do stuff like that has been fun. we adapted an Edgar Rice Burroughs novel into a graphic novel, which was a licensed property. So there's been a lot of those where it's just fun to play in that universe. But it's when you're, especially when you're doing those well-known ones like the Burroughs or the Lone Ranger or whatever, knowing that they come with a built-in fan base, you're very careful not to mess with that. You don't want to anger said fan
because
base.
there is no one more intense than the fans of a legacy property, because they are the true believers. How did you get involved in writing licensed works and working in all these universes?
Dumb luck, really. It was just, like I said, it was one of those things. I was doing some work with Moonstone Books. I had written a couple other they were doing some public domain pulp characters like Domino Lady, who here on the wall, or Secret Agent, etc. And so they had the license for a couple of properties, and because I had worked with them, they knew what I could do, and they were just like, "Do you have any interest in the Green Hornet?" And I was like, "Absolutely." Finally, it was a great day for me, because finally I was able to tell my dad, I was like, "Hey, I'm going to write a Green Hornet story," and he's like, "Finally, something I've heard of." So so that was cool, and there is a bit of the fun of writing these characters that you like is one thing, but there's also a bit of, almost a little bit of respectability that comes with it, because people who are fans of those characters go, "Oh, well, there must be something to you if they're trusting
you with this property."
Right, because it's not like when you work for a publisher, you have to please the publisher. You have to work within the publisher's ground rules and guidelines. When you do a licensed property, you also have to work within, the license owner's guidelines. And these are not always people that are in publishing. So sometimes it makes things harder, but you have to be more creative to stick within the guidelines that they want to do. You have to know what you're doing. That's where it differs, because I get this a lot. People go, "Oh, so you're just writing fan fiction." And while technically, I guess you could say that, you can't write whatever you want when you're doing a licensed property. Unlike if you're writing
you cannot ship Tarzan and Lestat. It just ain't going to happen.
Exactly. Right. There's a lot of rules when you're doing it, for real, as opposed to when you're just doing it as a fan and you can do whatever you want. So there's a lot of that stuff. You want to make it so you've got to please the owners, and you don't want to alienate the fans either. It's like I used to say all the time. It's like people would say, when doing the Edgar Rice Burroughs, they were like, "How hard was it to put your spin on it?" And I was like, well, first of all, I wasn't writing Bobby Nash's At the Earth's Core. I was writing Edgar Rice Burroughs At the Earth's Core. So I'm retelling his story. I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel. And so stuff like that. And then once you do it a time or two, then it becomes easier for them to know, because you've already done it, and they know what you can do, and you know what to expect. It's easier sometimes for them to call up and go, "Hey, we've got this character. Are you interested?"
Lex, what are the worlds you are writing in, and how did you come to be writing in those worlds?
Well, I do a lot of, as anybody that has been watching any of these panels, I am the chick that is always on the Sherlock Holmes panels. Because I write a lot of Sherlock Holmes, which is really funny. I didn't think that I did, but I was kind of thinking about it the other day and looking at some of the things that I've done. I've actually done a lot of Sherlock Holmes. I mean, considering that most people never write any. So on that scale, I'm doing great. But I started writing Sherlock Holmes, and oh my God, this is going to sound so awful. The very first Sherlock Holmes thing I did that I let other people read was a Sherlock fan fiction. It totally was. And it was probably a little different than other Sherlock fan fictions, because it actually was, following a mystery. It wasn't just like, anyway. Yeah, exactly. I digress. But I had always wanted to write one, because I've been a Sherlock Holmes fan my whole life. Probably starting with young Sherlock Holmes way back in the 80s. So I'd always wanted to write one. So when it went into the public domain, I was like, oh yay, I can finally start using this character. So I just kind of wrote my first Sherlock novella, which is Chasing the Dragon. At the time I was writing for a little teeny tiny micro press called Little Red Hen. And our whole shtick was doing 99-cent romances that were like really short. And so I kind of wanted to get Sherlock laid. And so I wrote that one. So there was a story and there's some sexy times. After I did that, I was talking to John Hartness about it because he and I have been friends for a while. And he was like, well, why don't you write something in the Harker and the Quincy Harker universe, because Watson's grandson is actually a member of the Shadow Council. And I said, well, that's cool. I want to, but I kind of want to write, Holmes. And he was like, yeah, but we really want you to write Watson. So I decided to get around that. So because I wanted to write, like a Victorian Holmes story. So it's a Victorian Holmes story, but Holmes is a ghost. So yeah, that's kind of how I got into that. It was a bar conversation, really.
Everything with John starts with a bar conversation.
Absolutely, absolutely. Which is why it's so important to go to the bar, ladies and gentlemen.
Three writers walk into a bar, yes, and come out with contracts.
John walks out with 2 contracts.
Yes.
Sorry, well, you always think, right, the great writers, they're always alcoholics. And you think, oh, it's because they're tortured. No, it's because they all have to hang out at the bar.
To get the contracts. Yeah, that's what's
going on. To get the contracts.
Les, what worlds do you write in and how did you come to write in them?
Well, I'm probably the least experienced out of this illustrious panel because my start is in John Hartness's Bubbaverse. And of course, that started in a bar since we're already talking about that. Back when things were moving around and I got out and about, and I've been attending cons for a long time and having conversation with John in a bar, telling him how I was having a hard time getting some of my stuff published. And he said, well, why don't you just write a story for me on spec in the Bubbaverse? I don't have anybody, nothing. No. So if you're not familiar with Bubbaverse, he's got the Southeastern Monster Hunter. And then because Bubba's the Southeastern Monster Hunter, there's got to be Monster Hunters elsewhere. And he's like, I don't have anybody for the Northeast. And I'm originally from upstate New York. Please don't hold that against me. But
I'm so sorry. I was there in the winter once. It was awful.
Well, I haven't been back since I went to college, so it's all right.
I'm glad.
Except to visit family. But he's like, it followed a couple things. One was he didn't have anybody right in the Northeast. The old adage, write what you know. Well, if you're from up Northeast, write that. Sure, I grew up on a dairy farm with highly religious parents. I didn't see the Northeast.
But you saw a lot of cows.
Yeah, a lot of cows, a lot of school. That was about it. So my experience with it, so I kept it very central to where I grew up. And one of the fun things about John's verse is, as Bobby was talking about, when you have established characters, if you're touching anything that's in that verse, it has to fit in with everything else in the verse. And so John's rule is, if someone's written about it, you have to check with the other writer on what they wrote, just to make sure you don't violate anything to do. So I was like, all right, has anybody done a werebear? No. Great, I'm doing a werebear. Has anybody done Northeast? No, I'm doing Northeast. Nobody has written an origin story. My guy doesn't know anything about monsters because at the time when I started, I didn't know anything about monsters. I was always a sci-fi and fantasy fan, not really an urban fantasy fan. And so my character, write what you know. Well, I don't know monsters, so I'm going to figure it out as I go, and so's my hero. So that's kind of how that whole thing got started. But yeah, met in a bar, wrote the first story on spec. John picked up and got me a 3-book contract with him. So it was great to be in his universe there. Cool. And of course, that spawns into more and more things. So when you can do this, John uses his Bubbaverse to widen the audience of authors that are friends of his, and also introduce new authors like myself to his readership. So that's been fun.
Yeah, no, it's a win for everybody. Yeah. Rachel, RE, or whichever you prefer right now.
Rachel's
How,
fine.
okay, how did you wind up writing in somebody else's universe? Did you beat up Rick? Did he beat up you? How did this happen? And tell us a little bit about the universe you write in.
Okay, well, ours actually did not start in a bar because we're both horrible lightweights. And we're, I think, the only two people on the panel that have not written in one of John Hartness's universes.
I
Yeah.
haven't either, so
Yet.
yes.
Yet. I'm
Yeah,
sure
yet,
he's going to
yet.
get us at some point.
Oh, no, John wouldn't try to strong arm me. I know where the bodies are buried. I put them there.
As I'm the one who's like, no, pacifist. No, but yes, let's just all laugh at a moment. I am a complete pacifist. I am known as a total Pollyanna, sweetest sweet can be type of human being. Yet, see, I read this book called Bill the Vampire because I was the only Kindle Scout winning author who wrote vampire comedy, and they said, find somebody you can do comps with, you know? So that's how I met Rick.
Mhm.
And I ended up a moderator in his group. And as most people go, well, these two are nothing alike, right? I don't think half the people even knew that I wrote books for the first year that I was in there. And eventually he said, you know what? I saw like Kindle Worlds and I'm thinking about turning the Tome of Bill. Like there's other stories to tell in this universe. So me being try-hard little Rachel, who was actually secretly a huge fan of his third book, The Morning Woods, was like, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do it right. I'm going to get this. I wrote a 28-page outline, a full spec, this lovely professional email. And I'm like, I'm going to beat everybody else. And I sent it to him and I'm like, oh, please don't let too many people try this out. And
Nobody.
What did you do? What did you do with that 28-page email?
It's somewhere in my hard drive.
Never read it. Wrote a damn book together. Now we've written 4 together.
And you haven't killed him
what.
yet? You haven't killed him yet? You haven't sicked your cat on him?
I'm a pacifist. I think that's why he keeps me as a co-writer. He knows I'm like the one person.
I'll just say, as the world owner, I probably drive Rachel absolutely nuts because she'll come to me and be like, so let's talk about the series Bible, and I'll be like, okay, I guess I'll just kind of make this up as we go.
I do think sometimes we do, don't we fact check with each other? Like did that happen in that book? I am the crazy person who has read the entire Tome of Bill, all the books, and listened to the audiobooks beforehand because I am a try-hard. But I love the world because it was basically what if nerds were in urban fantasy and like the people who shouldn't be. So my whole pitch was, what if Destiny dialed the wrong number for a change? Because basically there's this terrible world-ending prophecy and the mages really, really, really want to win. So they're like, if we can't find the actual end of the world, why don't we try to create it and see if we can trick Destiny? So they do what any, sane person in a paranormal fantasy would do and select a teenage girl, because everyone knows that all destiny seems to boil down and hinge upon the wills of a teenage girl, and you have to have 2 white guys for her to fall in between. Like, this is how it works. So we took that horrible trope and completely turned it around.
Yeah, well, that taking a trope and turning it inside out, around, and putting its head where the sun doesn't shine is always a satisfying activity.
And I made him do all the, see, I was a myth minor in college. I was that level of nerd. So I get to play with all of my Greek mythology, and I got some Norse, and there's all sorts of fun stuff to play with, and Native American mythology, which I don't think gets nearly enough play in urban fantasy. So I think we had a blast. What do you think, Rick? How is it working with somebody else playing with your toys and asking things like, can one of the characters have a relationship with somebody else? Please.
You're fired.
How can you fire somebody who works for free?
I I get my royalties, baby. We got contracts. I get paid well for my services.
I wish it was free.
Oh. Yeah, funnily enough, who brings the award winning to the table?
Yes. Well, Rick, let's talk about, what does it feel, what was your original conception for Bill? And how does it feel to have someone working so actively in your world and taking it in directions you hadn't even imagined when you started?
Well, I think it's great. Like the whole concept of Bill the Vampire, Toma Bill in the sequel series, Bill of the Dead, is you're looking at a very small slice of a much wider world. It's told from first person, so you're really only getting this one character's perspective. But things happen off screen. Sometimes people go off screen and they won't come back. They'll get killed and stuff, because the idea is that this is a living, breathing world where stuff happens, where it's not like a video game where it stops happening when the main character is not on screen. So I've always been a fan of like the concept of looking at stories from another viewpoint. I don't like to retell stories, don't get me wrong. I don't want to go there and be like, okay, well, it's the same story but just told from the woman or the guy's standpoint. But somebody who's outside of the main story looking in, I've always loved stories like that. And so False Icons kind of serves that role of somebody who's trying to save the world kind of off camera to what the main series. And there's some great parts in it where they intersect. Rachel mentioned the third book in the series, The Morning Woods. There's a throwaway gag in there about a character that dies, and basically people just make a bad joke about it because they're all jerks.
And what do I do with that?
Yes, and she turned this into this whole backstory, this whole touching, like heartfelt, like like death scene, and it's just great how you see two different perspectives into essentially the same action. So
and they do interlock. Every single thing, we had to make them fit, but one is totally serious and sad, and the other's a joke.
Yeah,
and we make people feel bad.
Yeah, so I mean that's I think the fun part for me is just kind of like looking not just in a mirror, but it's like a skewed mirror. So you're looking at the reflection is not looking back at you. And I just think that's fun because it adds an extra depth. And it allows you kind of to expand upon the world and say, something, there's more going on than just from this doofus's perspective.
My doofus's perspective, thank you very much. I think we're the only ones who actually do it together. Everyone else, you just write in. So yeah, we have the hysterical back and forth and the world's worst writers chat that if anyone ever reads, they're going to be completely destroyed about the whole creative process. That's all I can say.
So basically you are backing and forthing in your own projects, but coming together and going, spitballing it between yourselves.
Yeah.
Is that something that any of the rest of you have experienced when you were writing in other people's worlds?
Well, I think from listening to what everybody has said thus far, the biggest thing we all have in common working in someone else's, there's a lot of question asking. You're constantly going, can I do this? Or, and a lot of times they go, why do you want to do that? Or, when you're working in somebody's, like Les was saying, have there been werebears? Mine was, have there been ghosts? Because I want to make sure my ghosts are the same as if anybody else has written ghosts, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of questions back and forth. Whether you're doing it yourself, you're still asking questions of the owners of the property, or if you're doing stuff together, there's a lot of back and forth about what can we do this, why should we do this, and yeah.
I asked if we could have Uranus and if he could look like John Hamm. That was my ask.
Yeah, and then after it was, I said yes, and then after it was done, she mentioned John Hamm again. I was like, by the way, who is that?
What? I got death
You just
too.
That says something. Working in fandom and you're creating a character who's best known for his suits.
He does wear some pretty, except we dress him up like a Hallmark stereotypical guy, which I'm sure Lex knows about. We got the flannel going because nothing says traditional Greek mythology like a dude in flannel.
Yeah, I still want to see Clive Owen playing Hades, but that's another thing. Anyway,
I like the way you were thinking.
yeah, especially the younger Clive Owen. Arthur level. Yeah, yeah. Anyway, Lex, you
Yes.
obviously, who do you ask questions for when you're dealing with Sherlock?
Nobody. Well, I mean, you always go, the thing about Sherlock Holmes is you always go back, if you have a question like that, you always go back to canon. So you can always go and consult the original books, the original stories. The good thing about that is that most of them, like Hound of the Baskervilles is the only novel-length Sherlock Holmes story. So they're all relatively short. The only problem is there's like a million of them. And the weird thing about Holmes is any kind of really iconic character like that, there's a whole lot of, okay, was this actually in canon or was this something that was in like the Jeremy Brett series? Or is this really canon or is this something that somebody else in some other book that I read? Because a lot of, I won't say everybody, but there's a lot of iterations of Sherlock Holmes and different versions. So you kind of have to go back and consult the canon. And I rely on Google a lot. I know that probably sounds crappy,
No,
but
that's good.
because Wikipedia is just full of stuff. Like every time I have to come up with something in Watson's that has happened in Watson's past, I always consult Wikipedia because it has a complete bio of the character. Because you want to make sure you get that stuff right. You don't want to steal from somebody else's intellectual property. Because the weird thing about Sherlock Holmes is Sherlock Holmes and all the canon, with the exception of a few really later stories, are all in the public domain. But there have been so many people that have written novels and short stories and things like that about the character. Well, those things are not in the public domain. There are things about, like, in particular, BBC Sherlock that people try to use all the time. And I'm like, you can't use that because that's actually Mark Gatiss's intellectual property. So, it's a little weird there.
It's the Arthur problem, isn't it? It's the same with when you do King Arthur.
Yes, exactly.
Or Dracula.
Yeah, we were talking about Dracula. Me and Bobby were on a panel a couple weeks ago talking about Dracula, and it's the same kind of thing because you have the historical Vlad Tepes, Vlad the Impaler, who Dracula is based on. You have the original novel, and then you have all of these, movies and books and all of that stuff that's not something that you can use.
And with your fans, it sometimes becomes an issue because to the fans at large, that's part of it to them. They watch that movie, that's it. And if you're not using it, they think you're doing something wrong because you're not using this popular trope of the character that has been tacked on over the years.
Like Dracula
Sherlock
not
Holmes
being able to do it. Night.
Not being able to go out at day with Dracula.
Yeah.
I love doing that one.
Yeah. Sherlock Holmes fans are like Star Wars fans in tweed. I mean, they are like, Bobby, you've written Sherlock Holmes before. Have you gotten angry grams from Sherlock Holmes? Oh yeah. Yeah.
It's
Holmes with her, and I let him be naked. So I get lots and lots of interesting hate mail.
Right, because
how dare you imply that Sherlock Holmes has a penis?
Yeah.
Oh my god!
They've
I
built
always thought he had a vagina.
Right.
Well, but they've built these ideas of what the characters are in their head. So to a fan, this character is an amalgamation of all the stuff they've watched, read, or whatever.
Right.
But all of that is not available for us to play with.
Absolutely. Do you face any of these issues, Les, working in the Bubbaverse? Do you have any angry grams from the fans of other writers in the verse, or John's
Not
fans
yet.
going,
Not yet. That may come eventually, but the biggest problem with the Bubba verse is that it's not just dealing with John and what John's written. It's dealing with what Gail Martin's written. It's dealing with what J.D. Blackgroves has written. It's, anybody who's touched that. And then John went and said, you know what? The Bubba verse and the Harker verse, they're the same universe. So now it's not only just what was written in the Bubba verse, but if Alexandra put something in there in her story that happens in the Harker verse that touches on something right, that's in there. So it's really critical, and Melissa MacArthur with John and Falstaff Books has done such a great job of maintaining a universe Bible. And it's sometimes as simple as there's a djinn in this person's story and it's in the Harker verse, and here's just a couple key features, because I had a djinn in my second one and I had to figure out what can I touch, what I cannot touch. And then and then John goes and says, yeah, there's werebears, there's werewolves, there's lots of were things, and they don't all behave exactly the same. There's a handful of hard, fast rules about what happens with wares, but my werebears are pretty isolated type creatures. They don't pack up like other wares. That was my way of getting around a handful of things, but that's what worked.
In different locations, they grew up differently, or they
let's not talk about locations. I'm looking at Rick as the Boston girl who will constantly give him crap.
One of the problems with my
what did
location
he
was
do?
I had a lot of my third story invoked a new kind of monster hunter that I wanted to team up with mine, and that's the Amish. So because a lot of Amish people moved into upstate New York from Pennsylvania.
Oh my God, Amish monster hunters! Yes,
you gotta check it. It's hilarious. But Gail writes.
I will gladly beta read this for you, Les.
Her monster hunter is in Pennsylvania. So John, when I told John, like, I'm really thinking about doing this Amish monster hunter, and he's like, all right, you've got to contact Gail, make sure it's not going to step on any toes down there. I'm like, so there was some of it's not just getting the okay by John, but it's getting the okay by anybody who might have an ancillary input, especially since in the world of who writes in Bubbaverse, I'm probably the most, not necessarily an experience, but the lowest person on the totem pole. So anything I want to do that might touch someone else's, I always have to clear it with them first.
But what could also happen though, down the road, someone else may do something that uses something you've created. So we are building this really big, interconnected universe.
Are you in it?
Poor Alex Gideon.
Yeah, well, I think he got his contract after mine, so I guess I'm not the lowest one in the universe anymore.
But Bobby, are you in the Bubbaverse or as well?
Yes. They haven't come out yet, but I'm doing a book called Hunter Houston Horror Hunter. He is the number 2 guy in the Southeast. After Bubba, spoiler alert, in one of the later books, Bubba and his team disappear. And so my guy, who has been quite content to let Bubba handle the big stuff and he handles the little stuff.
Like the were-possums,
now suddenly finds himself having to work for a living, and he is not happy.
Well, if he goes to all that trouble to be alliterative, he has other priorities.
Alliterative names are the best, right, Rick?
Well, I have to give John a lot of credit, because I originally was going to call him like John Houston, the horror hunter, and John's like, no, his first name's Hunter, and I'm like, no problem.
And Rick, are you going to be getting involved in this mess too?
I mean, who knows down the road?
But you've evaded it so far.
I don't know if it's evaded so much as John has probably looked at me and been like, just go away.
In fact, he has not said that. That is not true.
I
talked to John too.
I was going to say, when he watches this, it's going to be, oh yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna get the and you're after you finish this novel that you're supposed to have tied to Melissa in March. Yeah, can you just spit out a Bubba and maybe have like some more hallucinogenic vampire semen? We know that's your thing. That sort of thing. But no, I'm so glad I only have to deal with Rick. Although I think he's pretty much like worth all the rest of y'all put together with the way he drives me crazy. But yeah, I'm his Boston fact checker because, you know, I can handle vampires and werewolves and death otters and explosions and time travel, but by God, there are no above ground car washes in the city of Boston. They don't exist.
This Boston is one reality removed from ours, and in that reality, there are car washes.
I'm so glad you blew it up and I could put a park over it. That's all I can say. There are no above. Every time I go to Boston, I take a picture of actual car washes, and they're all in like hotel basements. They're all in parking garages underground. That's where they have them. You can't have them above ground because it freezes over winter. And
I had no idea about that. I mean, I knew about Boston winters, but I didn't realize they had no above ground.
You have to go about 35 to 45 minutes outside of the city to get to your first above ground car wash. And yes, I did the tour just to piss off. I went to Salem and I'm like, look, this is where you blew up.
I love the fact that she obsesses over this because whenever I get one of those texts, like, look, an above ground car wash, delete.
No, below ground. And I posted in his group. It's just, I know it's the joke. I am his little pedantic fairy who checks all these teensy little details and then, you know, forgets things like plot, right?
I am terrible because she'll send me this thing like, well, what about this? Because this doesn't exist. This isn't real. Magic.
Fiction,
yeah. There's like in this epic like writer chat that is our sort of pseudo Bible. I swear about every few days there's just because magic. Whenever we're working on it, it's like it's magic.
It's like,
my original vampires didn't have any.
It's like, Rick, you know, there's no maple trees above the lake, you know, above the Arctic Circle. I'm like, okay,
there's not.
But you can buy talking Sasquatches, but not trees. Okay.
I explained the maple, like every little detail he gets wrong, I make it a point to make a logical.
It wasn't the detail I got wrong. It was the detail that I basically was just like, you're in a forest full of like talking Sasquatches. Deal with the rest.
Well, the funny thing is, though, in all fairness, you know, everybody associates maples and maple syrups with Canada. So, you know,
the Arctic Circle.
I know. I will. That is now burned into my soul, Rachel. Don't worry. I shall never, ever forget it. When I am dying 110 years from now, as I am laying there clutching somebody with my bony claw, my last words will be, there are no maples above the Arctic.
At least not in forests. There may be lone specimens. I have to clarify because somebody will probably go, you know, to northern Canada, go, look, we found one maple tree. I'm gonna be like, okay, all the conifers laugh at you.
Do you face any of these issues, Les? I mean, have you basically had to deal with the fact that, oh, but Gail, there's nothing like this there now, or vice versa?
No, when I talked to Gail about the Amish Monster Hunter, she's like, actually, I write over in Pittsburgh. There's no Amish over there, so you're clear. Go ahead. By the way, that sounds like a really great idea, and so I was able to use it. I deliberately, because being the novice writer getting into this field was like, I don't want to step on toes, so I stayed about as far away from established canon that I didn't have to worry about it.
Mm-hmm.
And trusted my editor to be like, if I misstepped and stepped on something, that my editor would pick it up and say, hey, you can't do that.
Yeah. So
good editor
I played
lives.
it safe and just stayed away.
Yeah. For you, what is the best aspect of working in somebody else's world?
Mine was having an established readership that I could kind of pitch my stories to, because I don't have a big, huge Twitter following. I don't have a big, huge Facebook following, so I didn't have a base to kind of start being an author on, and being able to kind of hitch my wagon to John Hartness and Gail Martin and Bobby Nash is going to be in there. So Alexander Christian, all these other authors that have been writing, and I've been seeing at cons for the last decade when I've been going to cons. It's been great. Like, hey, I'm actually part of the crew now. Yay!
Yay!
But yeah, it's the experience, and it was a way in and a way to step up my career and get my first publishing credits down. It's gone beyond that for me, because I know my first, I went back and I self-published one story, and I liked the story, but it could have been a whole lot better. But after having written in John Hartness's Bubbaverse and learned how the editing process works, learned about my really weaknesses that came out during the editing process, I'm able to now put those into my future works to make it better. And one of the big ones is, you know, everybody has this one story that they started writing a decade before they ever got published. And I had mine. It's my baby. I love it. And it's going to come out next year because John bought it. But I'm going back through and trying to edit it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what did I do? This is, I can't believe they bought it. Holy crap, I got so much to do here, and I'm trying to fix it and trying to get it correct and fixed right now. But learning and breaking my chops and working in this wider universe and having this breadth of people I can ask questions of if I need to, that's probably the biggest thing for a novice writer, to be able to jump in on someone else's established work, is both to pick up the readership so that you've got someone to pan off up on, and then just, it's kind of that mentoring, mentoree type relationship that kind of helped make my career go forward. Because as everybody trying to break into this realizes that you're always spinning your wheels and you're getting rejections on your stories. We don't know why, because you can't know, you're usually pretty short rejections, because these people are reading thousands of stories and they can only pick a couple. So they don't have time to personally edit each one. And I couldn't figure out what I was doing wrong. I'm a much better writer now that I've had the opportunity to write in John Hartness's verse. And that's probably true if you write in anybody's verse who takes the time to make sure that you're putting out good work. So that's where it's really helped me.
There's also a bit too, especially with what John has done, and others have done it as well. But there's also a sense of a little bit of community building that he does, because if you see any of us who have done work for John at a con, we're usually on panels together. You know, we're talking up each other's series as they come out. There's a lot of that comes out. So you're not by yourself, because as a published author, even working for publishers, even if you're not doing it yourself, a lot of times when you work for publishers, you still feel sometimes like you're the lone person out there trying to sell this book. Because the publisher is on to the next book once your book's out. And so having other people who are like in the same universe, and we can talk up my book and their book at the same time, it does make it feel like you're a part of a community that otherwise you might not if you were just on your own.
And it's great hearing other authors say, hey, you really like my Monster Hunter? Go check out Les Gould's book. His is a little bit different, but man, it's a great Monster Hunter story too. Go read that one. And I can say, you know, when Bobby's comes out, when John's is out, and like, hey, if you love, because I got people like, oh, I really like your stories. Go read Bubbaverse. It's a lot funnier. And we all take little different twists on, because John, I can't compete with John's humor in Bubbaverse. I don't
think anybody can, honestly. Yeah,
so my story, I was going through some stuff. I was dealing with it. I dealt with it in my story. My story is definitely darker. And it's kind of a bridging story as far as like tone between Bubba and Parker. Parker's more of a darker, more serious, where Bubba's very off the cuff, kind of funny. Well, he's a redneck hillbilly from Georgia, or who's out there fighting monsters. So it's going to be kind of off the cuff and funny. And so mine kind of bridges the gap. And since he combined the two universes, one of the reasons why he chose to pick it up, because it has that different kind of tone, which kind of lets another reader it's another way in for readers to find their way into the overall Bubbaverse, and rising tide raises all ships. So each time we can sell any one of our stories, we can pitch the other people in the universe and raise us all up together. So.
And in 10 years, we'll do an Avengers style crossover with all of them.
I'm waiting for him to pitch an anthology that we all like throw a story in, like the big old Monster Hunter convention, and we all got to tell stories.
Yeah, well, you know, a Monster Hunter convention would be a great theme for an anthology. that would
Do
really
not
work.
give John ideas. He's probably already, as soon as he sees this, he's gonna be like, okay, let's put that on the docket, Melissa.
And he's
I
gonna
think
blame
it's-
He
me
said he
think
was
for
it's
never.
great.
He said he was never going to do an anthology again in life.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
after Lawless Lands, he said he was never doing another one ever in life.
No, he's gonna convince somebody else to run it for him.
Yeah, he's gonna
and
let
it will still-
Right.
Melissa edit it instead. He'll just
Yeah.
Yeah, he'll find somebody else to edit it. But yeah, this is a Monster Hunter convention. Ideally happening with some other kind of fan convention, so it's really hard to
so
tell.
it's covert.
Like the
under
Supernatural episode where they had the
Yeah.
Supernatural con. Yeah. That was
Yeah,
pretty meta.
because it wouldn't be any fun if you could tell the bad guys right off the bat. But anyway, Rachel, what for you is the best part of, you were writing before you
Yeah.
and Rick got together. What's the best part for you of working in somebody else's world?
I think a lot of it is what's inside. I mean, let's be real. Most people who write lots of fantasy novels are not always the most stable individuals. Like, we have our issues. We're working them out.
I think that's just writer in general.
Just writers in general. But, people always joke the horror writers are the most polite people ever. They get all their demons out on the page. But no, I wanted to step a little bit out of my comfort zone. I'm a little more rambly. I'm sure Rick will tell you how much I ramble. I'm much more science oriented and I get obsessed with details. He helped me be more fun and free and just get some pages out when times are bad. And it's nice to have, oh God, I'm gonna get mushy. I'm sorry, Rick. Cover your ears so you don't hear the mushy. But it's nice to have a friend that you get to work with, because having a colleague is a rare gift when you're writing. And he introduced me to the Authors and Dragons crew, and now we get to work together with that. It's a gift, and you should never, ever, ever return a gift like that. So yeah,
it might be my fault that John owes you, because wasn't it a dragon or so we met up and I was like, oh yeah, this is Rachel.
yeah, it was Con Carolinas when you first introduced it, and I was terrified and I didn't want to pitch anything. And you found me when I was slightly tipsy, and somehow I ended up mentioning something, and later at Dragon Con, he bought 4 books from me.
That is a great story.
But yeah, I'm kind of curious, Rick, what do you get out of all of this?
Yeah, I like a hearty handshake, I think.
Not having to do audio notes for the narrators? I mean, besides that.
Not having to keep your own story Bible. Finding out that there are no above ground car washes.
I mean, what I get out of it is what I mentioned earlier. Is like, is being able to look at my own universe from a fresh perspective. I've written other characters' point of views in there, but to get a fresh perspective that's not from my head, come in there and be like, well, what if this happened? That's just awesome to be like, wait, yeah, you're right. What if that happened? That has potential. So I mean, in our own universes, we're essentially God, but we're not omnipotent. There's always that idea where somebody will mention something, you're like, well, damn, why didn't I think of that? So having somebody else there is that third party. It's almost like that really good editor who comes along and is like, this is a dumb idea, or why didn't you do this? So it almost is like having a voice in your, like a little voice in your shoulder, like whispering in your ear going, well, what if this happened? So it's kind of it's an entire plus situation, win-win.
I like to think I'm pretty fun to work with. I mean, on the good days.
Yeah, I know you like to think that.
I'm curious, did y'all ever run into the case where an idea was pitched, you're like, oh no, that can't happen because I don't want it to, and then you got to think about it, you're like, actually that kind of needs to happen because that's a really great idea.
The yeeting.
Yeah, that's probably 90% of our conversations. Well, she'll hit me with something like, and I'll be in the middle of something else and just be like, and I'll be like, either like, okay, I can't deal with this right now, like a quick yes, no. Actually, I tend to maybe Rachel to death. That's that's my way of basically saying, yeah, I'm kind of busy right now. I can't really deal with this. Yeah, I'll think about this. But yeah, then it's like, once it percolates, it like sets in, then it's like, yeah, that's actually not a bad idea. And I mean, I think from my perspective, owning the world, I try to be very selective about the hills I want to plant my flag on or die on. Those are few and far between. Most of the time, I want to kind of meet Rachel in the middle and be like, okay, well, let's figure out a way around this. I will admit, occasionally, I will go in and be like, you know what this section of the book needs. You know this character you really like. I'm just gonna kill him.
You brought some back from the dead too. Don't forget that. And you have an annoying habit of cock blocking my poor cowboy vampire. It's just now a joke.
I'm sorry. The Tomobile universe is the one vampire universe where the vampires ain't getting any.
It's true, and totally, it's hilarious. But come on, the poor guy. It's been centuries. Not really.
I hope it hasn't been centuries, because that would make a guy really, well, we won't go there. Anyway, Lexi, what is the best thing for you in working in somebody else's universe, in a universe you did not create?
Probably that somebody else did all the heavy lifting. You know, and it's really nice to be able to just go in and focus on the story and the plot and the characterization, when all of the settings and the backstory and all of that stuff has already been worked out for you. You know, and I think that's what draws a lot of writers to doing fan fiction is, you know, sometimes you just want to get that story out and you don't want to have to worry about, okay, well, if this happens, what's going to happen over here? And what is this going to cause to make, you know, what kind of effect is this going to have? And all of that stuff is already built in when you're writing in somebody else's universe. You know, you just don't have to expend a lot of energy world building because the world's already there for you.
And okay. Oh, please go on. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I was just, you know, there's other things to be neurotic about.
Well, no, I mean, go if there's something else that you want to mention, because, you know, we've only got one more.
That was it.
Okay.
That was it.
Well, now this question, everybody's been glowing so well. I'm going to throw this out, and whoever wants to answer it. Are there any downsides?
Yes. Because you can't touch on anything that's been established. So when you're writing your own story, you are the god of your universe. You want ships to fly on purple magic, they can fly on purple magic, and then you can just say that's how it works. I had in my first story, my werebear, not to give too many spoilers, takes a bullet wound, and I had it, you know, her healing from it, but I never had her expel the bullet wound. John writes back, he's like, I love the story, but werebears or wares cannot heal with a silver still in them. And so I had to address that particular element. So there's like, you're still bound by rules. It's great because it lifts me up. It gives me a platform to write on. It gives me a lot of the world building's already done. But at the same point, it also puts restraints on me. I can't do just anything I want, and which is the benefit of writing your own thing. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's like I said earlier, that's the biggest difference between doing fan fiction. Most tie-in work I've done or licensed work I've done usually comes with a Bible that's packed full of you can't do this, and there's a list. And so, and a lot of it's the stuff that you would expect. They probably have heard pitched 100 times. So there's a lot of that. You can't, you know, when you're doing your own, you can kill characters or, you know, oh, this is the perfect point for that character to die. Well, I don't own that character, so I can't kill them unless I can find a way for them to be alive at the end of the story. It's like if you were writing a Star Trek episode. You can kill Spock, but at the end of the episode, Spock's on the bridge, you know, warping off to the next adventure. It's that kind of thing. These are just toys that someone's letting me play with, and I can't break them. I have to put them back how I found them.
Right. Yeah, poor Alex Gideon. He probably thinks that I am gunning for his character. I made it a point when I started writing the Harker books that I was not going to touch anything. And I have kind of a unique experience because everybody else is kind of in the same sort of time period. S.H. Roddy and I are both writing in Victorian England. And so we're like, okay, it's cool. As long as we don't mess with each other, we're fine. Well, then, damn it, Alex started writing Aleister Crowley. And for some reason, he keeps getting, not Crowley himself, but the Order of the Golden Dawn keeps becoming villains. And they were villains in the last one. Well, they were an offshoot of villains in the last one, and then they're participating in the villainy in the one that I'm working on now. And he's gonna end up writing me a letter going, Lex, would you please get off of my stuff? So yeah, you kind of have to
even Yates.
Yeah, exactly. No, not Yates, not Yates.
You're going to tell me Maud Gunn is in there too, and I'm just going to go, no.
No, fortunately, nobody is named. Nobody is named because I was really trying to avoid anything that would mess anybody else up. I think there's another author whose name escapes me is doing Mycroft Holmes, and we've agreed, okay, we're gonna like stay away from each other. The only recurring Harkerverse character that appears in my stories is Luke, who is of course Dracula. But every time I put anything in, I always run it by John first. But I try not to make any of the other characters major players in mine, just because I'm desperately trying not to break anybody else's story.
Yeah, and as the world gets more complicated and larger, that becomes harder and harder. In one sense, this is not a problem you face, Rachel and Rick, because you are the world, if you will.
You are the people.
You are the world.
Yes.
You are the children.
Yes.
Yeah.
Aside from bad songs, what, if any, are the downsides of working with each other?
Schedules. I mean, it's like any group project, when you have more than one person, like sometimes you have to wait, and when you're in a creative throw, it's like, okay, I want to write the next chapter. Oh, I have to wait for the next one to come in. It's not horrible, but it's definitely a challenge from time to time. And I have to deal with an annoying thumbs up emoji instead of getting real answers to my questions. So that's my other downside.
I mean, I don't think that, I can think of very few downsides of working with Rachel. The downsides of a shared world are more on the finished end. And I think it's the same downside that you're going to run into for any author who has, say, a popular series, and then you could start writing something new, is convincing that core readership to move over to something new. And I think it's more frustrating when it's in the same world and you have like a small percentage of the readers of the main series who are moving over to something new and they're enjoying it. And you're like, hey guys, the people who are here are really enjoying it. Maybe you want to try it. But you have, I guess that group who just want to be kind of purists or so, and they're like, no, I'm just going to read the core story and not worry about, spin-offs or so. So that can be frustrating, is, convincing that audience to move over and say, this is part of the world too. And you're kind of missing, you're not missing out something of the main story, but you're missing out just in the wider world by not giving this a try. And I mean, that can be a hard sell, especially since the False Icons book have a different tone than the Toma Bill books, and that alone makes it a challenge. People want dumbass humor in one, and they move over, and there is a decent amount of that humor, but it's not like the core of that series. So yeah, I think that's just the challenge, is just finding that audience and getting them to move over. But once they do, like I said, it's kind of like they're like, well, damn, I wish I did this sooner.
I hate hearing that because I hear it over and over again. Like, oh my God, this is so good. Why didn't like?
Well, whose fault is that? Smack.
Like, we told you. We told you, but yeah.
Well, this hour has just flown by, but before we go, I want to ask you all to let me know what your current release is and where folks can find you on the web. So, Rachel?
Well, my latest full-length release is Half-Hearted Hunter, which is the False Icons book 3. So everyone has a character named Hunter apparently on this panel. And you can find me at www.rachelecard.com or on Amazon because they still own part of my soul because I was a Kindle Press author.
Ah, well, hey, Kindle Press did a lot of good and a lot of, well, we won't go there. Anyway.
Yeah.
So, Les, what about you? What's your latest release and where can folks find you?
The latest one that actually come out is Beginner's Luck. It's a collection of the 3 novellas in the Bubbleverse series. Follows Matthew Peterson, a Army vet who finds out the world's bigger than he is. So that's my latest release. You can find me on my website, lesgould.com. You can also find me at Les Gould Writes, and that's pretty much Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And my sci-fi series is scheduled to be released as long as I can get my edits done in time in February. So I'm really looking forward to having that hit the floor right around my birthday. So I'm excited about that one.
Great. Rick, what about you?
I'm going to double dip since Rachel already mentioned Half-Hearted Hunter, which is out there. But I also have another book that's a recent release. It's called Carnage à Trois, and it is the third book in my Bill of the Dead series. That's out there. As for me, you can find me pretty much on rickgualtieri.com or any major social media as Rick Gualtieri. And if Rick Gualtieri is too hard to spell, just Google Bill the Vampire, and that will eventually get you to somewhere I am.
Okay.
Or R.E. Carr. You can find him through me too.
Cool. Okay, Lex.
My latest release is Dr. Watson and the Ladies Club Coven. It is the second book in the Dr. Watson Shadow Council Archive series. As far as finding me, I am, of course, on social media as Alexandra Christian, sometimes as Lexi Christian, and alexandrachristian.com. But if you go there right now, it's under construction. So fuss at my web mistress.
Okay, and Bobby?
My most recent release is the first volume of Snow Shorts. This is one I mentioned earlier, where I'm inviting other authors to do short stories in my Snow universe. We originally released them as 99-cent ebooks, but then every 3 we collect as in novella size, which is how I release the Snow series that I write in this kind of format. And so this was the most recent. We have Snow shorts coming out throughout the rest of the year. Out of every 3, I'm going to write one of them, so I'm in each of the books because I figure I'm publishing it. I should at least be in.
What is the Snow universe? That was the one universe you haven't mentioned.
Snow is it's a crime action thriller series. It's my love letter to this type of like books and PI and cop books and shows of the 70s and 80s. So they're heavy on action and character, and a lot of gunfights and car chases and stuff like that. It's a lot of fun, big adventures, and I also like to kill people, so that happens a lot too. But it is
in fiction, I hope.
In fiction, yes. But it is a modern day
Or is it?
setting. Well, you've got to research,
Right.
but it is in a modern day setting. So, and so this year I decided it would be fun to let a few other writers do some stories. And one of the most terrifying things I've ever done in my life, but also very rewarding because I've gotten a lot of wonderful stories in from very talented writers. But my fear was not, will they do a bad job? My fear is what's going to happen when they write my character better than I do. That was the fear in my head. And I've been very lucky. They've all turned in wonderful stories. There's more coming. So we're going to keep those up. And the regular Snow, I'm working on book 6 now, which is almost done. The Sheriff Myers Mysteries, I'm working on book 2 of that. So look for both of them sometime before the end of the year. And then the Hunter Houston horror stuff from Falstaff is, I don't know dates yet. I know I just talked to a cover artist this week, so I know it's moving. It's going to be 4 books total. I've written 3 of them, so I've still got to write one. So, so there's plenty of stuff in the pipeline.
Okay, great. And
yes, BobbyNash.com is my main site. Ben-books.com is my indie press. AbrahamSnow.com will get you to the Snow series. Author Bobby Nash on Facebook, at Bobby Nash on Twitter, and Bobby Nash Writes on Instagram.
Okay.
I forgot to say, I'm a total recar on all social media platforms because I won the online handful lottery.
Absolutely, absolutely. Anyone else want to throw in their social media handles? And I hear crickets.
I think I was the only one who forgot initially, so they're just letting me have that quiet moment.
Okay. Well, thank you all for joining us here tonight. And thank you out there from ConTinual, the never-ending convention.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.